Okay, I think we can make a start. So good morning, good afternoon to everyone. Welcome to this CARTO webinar. Today we're going to be looking at CPG or FMCG if you're from the UK. And we're going to be showcasing our integrated analytics platform specifically for those organizations that work within consumer brands. Just some very quick introductions. So my name is Jamie Woolley. I'm the Director of Product Marketing here at CARTO, based in Madrid. And with me on the line is Matt. Hi, Matt. If you could just introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, hey, everyone. Thanks for being here today. My name is Matt Forrest, based out of New York in the United States. And I head up sort of a various thing of our technical product stack. So
great. Thank you. Okay, so just in terms of housekeeping, so these sessions are recorded. So after we've finished the webinar, you'll receive a link to the recording and also the slides. There's a chat or Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. So if you have any questions, then please feel free to add them there. In terms of today's agenda, first, what we'd like to do is talk a little bit about business context. We'd like to walk through some of the key challenges that CP companies are facing today. For many different verticals, as you can appreciate, these are quite tough times with lots of uncertainty. But we'd like to walk through a few of those challenges and then explain how, based on this context, we've developed a specific analytics platform for CPG companies. So I'll walk through at a very high level the key components of that platform, and then hand over to Matt, who will give us a demonstration of the data and the analytical capabilities, talking to a very specific CPG use case. As I say, we'll have some Q&A time at the end, so please drop your questions in the Q&A button there, and we'll tackle them at the end of the call. So before we dive into the content, we'd like to run a very quick poll. So firstly, to understand your role, because that'll help us adapt and adjust the content to be more aligned to your expectations. So if you could just describe for us your role and responsibilities, please. So do you work in CPG in an analytical type function, in CPG in a more commercial sales and marketing role? Do you work with clients that are in this CPG space or any other? So if you could just select the option that best fits. We'll just wait a moment and then have a look at the responses. Thank you. Okay, very interesting. So we seem to have a skew towards providers or suppliers that work with clients that are in the CPG space, which is great. And number two is analytical profiles. And a lot of the content will focus today on providing that analytical functionality to work on CPG use cases. And then we have two responses that are other. So thanks for completing that. That helps us a lot. Okay, let's talk a little bit about context. So, what's keeping CPG companies awake at night? I'm pretty sure these trends or these issues are consistent across many verticals in the economy and many different markets. So, we've just come out of a global pandemic, the war in the Ukraine, and that's led to quite high inflation across many developed and developing markets across the globe. And that's impacted consumer behavior in quite significant ways. So first is that they're very concerned about raising prices, not only energy prices, but also the products that they buy on a day-to-day basis. And this means that customers or consumers are more actively managing the way they look at their finances. They're looking to trade down, perhaps moving away from more premium brands to white label or better value alternatives. And overall, consumers are much more in control of spend and finances. And that has some key implications for CPG organizations. So the first is that they need to be able to innovate with new product categories to address these changing needs. Also look at new customer segments that perhaps they've not focused on previously, and also new geographies. They also need to look at improving their promotional effectiveness by using advanced analytics, really using data and insight to optimize that promotional spend. And the same for marketing, being much more data-driven to take into consideration consumer behavior, insight to not only develop new products and product categories, but how to take those products to market. There's an interesting set of statistics here from Accenture, and the high level is that most CPG companies are actually struggling to scale their analytical investments. So you can see there on the left, 89% of CPG executives actually agree that advanced analytics are really critical to their business. But on the flip side, the vast majority of executives acknowledged that they're struggling to scale these capabilities. So in many CPG organizations, there may be pockets of expertise working on very specific use cases, but more generalized usage of data and analytics to drive many different activities in with the organization still has to gain some traction. And when we look at trade promotion, what we're seeing is that a lot of these activities are running at a loss. So if you look at the P&L of many large CPG companies, after manufacturing, distribution and marketing, the next sort of cost line in terms of size tends to be around promoting to the trade channel, so those distribution partners and merchants. And you can see here in this study from McKinsey that it amounts to about 20% of the annual revenue, but these activities promoting products to trade partners and trade points of sale, we're actually losing money. 59% in most countries, and actually went up to 72% in the US, which is very high. So there's obviously a problem here, and anything that we can do in terms of data analytics and insight to better optimize those trade promotions is going to be very well received by CPG companies and decision makers. When we look at CPG analytics, then as you'd expect, many of their use cases are inherently spatial. And when I say spatial, I mean that it has a location data component, whether that's segmenting consumers, understanding not only where these customers are located, but where they move and where they buy, but also for product launches and market expansion. If we know a particular product category works in a particular point of sale, there's a geographical component to understand where we can expand at the most optimal level of investment. Obviously, trade area analysis is a traditional geospatial analysis that's done within CPG to understand, the trade area around key points of sale and what the consumer makeup is there. But also that insight can help prioritize trade promotions, which comes back to the previous point. If we understand that ideal customer profile, then we can use that insight to really focus the investment in those merchant partners where we're going to have most impact on sales and revenue. And then a whole host of other use cases within CPG, such as distribution, logistics, and supply chain, all have a location-based component or a need for spatial analytics and decision-making, be that where to place a new distribution center, how to optimize our last-minute logistics to have the minimal environmental impact, and how to optimize supply chains. And we saw that during the pandemic, there were some key issues within those supply chains, and this is where spatial data and analysis can definitely help. Okay, in terms of the solution that we've developed, so taking into consideration all of these contextual components and feedback from the many CPG customers that we work with, what we've done at CARTO is we've created a specific platform for CPG. We launched this late last year, and what we'd like to do now is just go through at a very high level some of the key components, and then I'll hand over to Matt and he'll walk us through some demos pulling on those components to run some analysis. So basically, CARTO for CPG is an integrated spatial analytics platform that's been developed specifically for CPG companies. It's fully cloud native, which means that The data is hosted, run, and analyzed within a cloud environment, be that Google BigQuery, Snowflake, Databricks, or Amazon Redshift. Now, typically when we do these implementations for customers, we ingest data, and there's lots of variety of data, really depending on who the CPG customer is, what their focus is in terms of category or product. But typically we have information on their point of sale locations and some key characteristics. That could even be sales data coming from those point of sales, those merchants. There's usually consumer data that could be aggregated panel information, and also competitor data. And normally what happens is during this process of ingest, we enrich the information with the data that CARTO can provide as part of our data observatory. Then within the platform itself, there are a number of key components. There's a tool for visualization analysis. There's an analytics toolbox, and these are key functions, analytical functions that allow users to run spatial analysis specifically for CPG use cases. We've developed an application to address a specific use case, which is customer segmentation. So CPG companies can optimize their trade marketing, trade promotion strategies based on the trade area of their points of sale and merchant network. And Matt will show us that a little bit later on. Obviously, we've got the data observatory where we distribute all of this spatial data that can be used for enrichment, and then a set of APIs and developer tools that those CPG companies that have the technical capabilities can use to develop their own spatial applications. And then, as I mentioned before, all of this data and analytical capability is used then to drive key use cases, be that segmented merchants, running trade area analysis, understanding consumers and consumer behavior, and optimizing market expansion or route to market plans. So this is at a very high level what the platform is, and I'd just like to focus on a few key elements in a little bit more detail. So the first is the data. You may be aware that we have a spatial data catalog. So this is a catalog of more than 12,000 data sets that come from the world's leading data providers, and they cover many different data categories that could be relevant for a CPG firm. We could have financial information in terms of credit card transactions, human mobility to understand how consumers transit or congregate around certain points of sale that can help us with identifying those optimal merchants we need to target, demographics, obviously, for segmentation, and some really interesting behavioral data sets that describe consumers in a way that makes it very easy to take those campaigns to market and activate marketing and promotional strategies. So yeah, a very complete catalog, and all of this data can be ingested into the platform seamlessly, and also used to enrich the CPG's own data to build out a more in-depth view of the data that they have in-house. In addition to the data, then we have analytics capability. So we've developed an analytics toolbox specifically for CPG. You can see on the right there, excuse me, some of the key functions in this toolbox. Basically, what this toolbox is a set of user-defined functions that are fully cloud native. So we worked to develop spatial SQL functions that run natively in the cloud. So if you're a data scientist or a data analyst in a CPG company working on a use case, you can call these functions to do transformations, visualize massive data sets, carry out clustering, and all of this analysis happens natively in the cloud. So these SQL queries are pushed down to the cloud data warehouse, which makes them very performant, and secondly, very cost effective. Now, for CPG specifically, we've developed three functions. The first is a procedure to create and analyze trade areas. The second is to build clustering models to segment customers, merchant points of sale. And currently we're in the process of finalizing a merchant universe matching algorithm, which will help CPG organizations identify their best performing merchants and then look for very similar merchants in the broader geography, and that will help them with their market expansion strategies. So that's the analytics toolbox. This is all embedded within the platform and can be called directly from the platform itself. The final element is CARTO workflows, and this is a very exciting development that we'll be announcing very soon in beta version. And our aim with CARTO workflows is to democratize spatial analytics. So some of these functions are quite technical, and what we've found is that, you know, if you don't have that spatial SQL understanding, it's quite difficult to get up and running quickly. So what we've developed is a visual language interface that sits within the platform that allows business analysts and other profiles without that don't have that technical capability to build quite complex analytical workflows. So it's a drag and drop no code tool that helps analysts prepare data and build out complex analysis workflows. It also allows you to automate these workflows. So if you need a repeatable workflow, you can activate it on a regular basis. And it also allows for notifications. So if an organization, for example, wanted to run analysis to understand the impact of weather on their distribution efforts, then you could automate that workflow, gather those insights, and then automatically send alerts to different stakeholders within the organization to let them know that, you know, because of predicted weather patterns, there may be some impact on the distribution motion. So our aim with this is to unlock advanced analytics for a broader audience and to really open up analytics in a much more accessible way. Okay, that's an overview of the platform, and what we want to do before going into the demo is just run a very quick poll again. So if you could just answer this one question, that would be great. So what are the tools you're currently using for analytics? Are you working with a cloud data platform such as BigQuery, Snowflake, or the ones that are listed there? Are you focused more on universal business intelligence tools such as Alteryx, Tableau, all of the others that are mentioned in the list? Or are you not working with any specialist tools for analysis, and most of that analysis is done in Excel, Google Sheets, or similar tools? So we'll just wait a moment for that for the results to come in. Okay, so no major surprises here. The majority of you, 55%, are actually working and analyzing data in the cloud, which is great. Be interested to know which of those platforms you're using, but that's probably another conversation we need to have. And then second place, universal business intelligence tools such as Tableau, Alteryx, Power BI, and Click. Okay, just one person still using more traditional tools. Great, well, thanks for that insight, very useful. What I'll do now is I'll hand over to Matt, and he can take us through a specific use case and bring all of this to life in an example. So I'll just stop sharing, Matt.
All right, I can go ahead and pick it up from there. So yeah, I'm going to walk through a few examples about how we kind of bring all this together. What I'll go ahead and start with, let me see, here we go. So this is actually all of this brought together in one solution. This is our customer segmentation application, which is sort of the view of all of this data together. We're looking at, kind of an example here of California, but we can certainly move these around and find different areas. But effectively what we can do is we can zoom into a specific area. Let's jump up to California, or sorry, LA here. And we can start to see some different data about, our stores. We can see we have some coffee shops, some addresses, some different locations. We can toggle on and off our layers to see other points of interest. We can view population data. We can look at geosocial data or behavioral data, looking at the dominant sort of family. This is data from one of our data providers, Spatial AI, that kind of shows this information. And we can do a few other things as we start to zoom in. So what we can see here is I'm looking at 28, roughly almost 29,000 merchants in this area. And we can start to kind of filter those out to explore some different things. If we wanted to look at maybe just specialty food stores, beer and wine, and understand that from where we might want to sell a theoretical product. We can get in more detail about the specific lists of merchants if we want to find one in detail. We can look at, other POIs in the area like grocery stores and see where those are when I add that layer back on. Demographic data, households, things like that. And then some of the family groups as well from a sort of behavioral perspective. There's a lot you can kind of start to study from this is to sort of understand what you're looking at and within that area and so on and so forth. So we'll zoom back to the full map view here. Actually turn that off and then there we go. So what I love about this is we can actually kind of create a new analysis. We can go at a state or country level. Let's say we're interested, we're going to go with California here, and we can even go by a specific county, right? So we can select all of them, or we can just run the whole state. In this case, let's go ahead and maybe we want to go and do some sort of study in San Francisco County. And we can continue from there. Next, we're going to look at specific, customer categories. So, we want to actually focus in, let's say, gas is probably not as popular in San Francisco County. So let's go with restaurant and other eating places. And then we can add in our data categories here. So these are the sort of behavioral segments. Now, what I really love about these consumer segments is that it's demographic data that is anyone can get access to from the census or anything like that. That's split apart and defined into very specific, demographic groups that are very, sort of well described. So you can kind of see here, if we wanted to look at these young professionals, maybe we're curious about educated urbanites, and we wanted to, sort of understand their consumer spending. Let's imagine that we're, looking to place a new food product. So this is food that they're going to eat away from their home. So we're in restaurants. You can look at, human mobility to say how many people are visiting locations. So we want to look at, of course, let's say resident visitors, and then you can define age here. Now, age is relatively defined within those other categories, but let's add income as a metric as well. And we can define our segments. How many groups do we want to create? So let's go ahead and create 5. And I'm just going to run this as Matt's SF and now. So you can run as many of these as you want, right? So we're going to go ahead and run this. This is going to be running here. Now, the goal of this, once again, is to use and understand our customers, in this case, customers being store locations or a physical point of interest, and effectively categorize them, right? That's the goal that we're trying to get to. Now, as this runs, I just wanted to showcase this because this is sort of the view of what this can do as an application. We're going to jump into a very specific use case under the hood and looking at a very specific example. So what I wanted to showcase and discuss, and let me just expand the slideshow screen here, is looking at a very specific product, in this case, Nitro Pepsi. If you're not familiar with this, this is a new-ish product. It's actually on the market now, and was being studied in 2019 to launch, and the goal was to launch it in 2020. Of course, we all know what happened in 2020, but this is a product that is a cola, but it has nitro or nitro infusion, right? So if you're familiar with nitro infused cold brew or coffee, anything like that, it's not as caffeinated. It's a very light, almost creamy kind of texture. I've had one of these before, and I thought it was pretty good. It was a very, very different than what you had before, but I think it's actually the same can they use for Guinness, where they have a nitrogen container in the bottom of it, and when you open it, it releases that nitrogen. So their product release and route to market goal was to look at a few different channels: bars, restaurants, convenience stores. So basically you could, have an experience with this product in a restaurant or bar as you're out, when you're out in doing that, and then translate that into actually purchasing that at a point of sale in a convenience store or a grocery store or something like that. Now, of course, that bars and restaurants shut down in 2020, and that kind of delayed this, but the product went ahead and launched no matter what into places where you could still buy things in convenience stores and things like that. But how would we tackle this potentially as things have opened back up, restaurants and bars are available and ready to position this product in? How could we actually use spatial analytics to tackle this? So I'm going to go ahead and go through here. This is a blog post, and we'll make sure to share this to show you. It kind of walks through each of the steps. Now, everything that we're doing in this application can be done with the platform itself. So these are all functions that you can use under the hood. This is sort of a use case that walks through, some the actual underlying components of the platform to segment customers. We have these functions that exist in what's known as our CARTO Analytics Toolbox, and that Analytics Toolbox lives directly within your data warehouse, right? So you can actually run these functions using your data and using core components of the CARTO platform, like enriching from our data observatory. So there's three sort of key steps. The first is you generate your trade areas. These could be, a radius or a simple buffer around a store location or a customer location. You could create, trade areas with drive times. You could use other methods that we provide as well. So first step is you just create your trade areas. The next is you actually create your customer segmentation data, right? So you pull in the data that you want to study, whether that's data about the points of sale themselves or the merchants, how big are they, how many people visit them, you could have total sales, anything like that, that's you have in your own data. You can also enrich that with the demographic data or some of that other segmentation data that I showed you over here, so you can certainly do that as well. And then once you have all that data, it'll actually enrich those trade areas with that new data. So okay, this has this many people and things like that. The final step is you run that segmentation. So you create a set of clusters, right? And you basically are trying to effectively categorize and understand what those look like. So we'll skip ahead here to look at, kind of how this does this. And the first place I'm going to stop is actually looking at, the correlations between different things. So you can see here, this is a correlation chart between the metrics that were introduced for this analysis. And you can see here, there's a correlation between, high correlation between incomes, some different demographic segments, different, categories like trendy eats and, things like that. But we'll look at this in the context of the Pepsi use case here. You can then run any number of clusters. So you can run this multiple times to find the best fit. And we use two metrics to look at this. These are two metrics to understand the models that run under the hood. And basically we can see here that the lowest numbers are the ones we want. So the ideal for this case is actually 7 clusters, right? To be clear, and I also want to call this out, these are not some black box analytics that we're running when we actually run the segmentation. So we use a combination of different things. We're using, PCA or principal component analysis to do this. These are pretty common data science models, so it's nothing that's going to be, sort of out of the box. You can kind of see some of the metrics within this. It's also in our documentation in the use case here. So, effectively we use k-means, which is a pretty common clustering method, and as well as principal component analysis, and that can be used as well, which basically tries to look at the factors and reduce the number of factors to find the most important ones. So it's a combination of these two really common models. All that to be said, if you're not familiar with these are all things that you or a data science team could do in-house. It's just we put them bundled into these 3 steps. And if you're not familiar with code, this could look a little bit overwhelming, which I totally understand. All that to be said, that code is running under the hood here, so it abstracts away the sort of the concept. But if you want to actually run this yourselves, with the docs that we have here, I was able to run this analysis in 20 minutes. So, okay, what were the steps? What did I take, and how did I do this? So my first step was to pull in a set of store locations, and I'll actually show this in context of the completed data here. So these are a set of different locations in Nashville. These are, once again, we're looking at grocery stores, convenience stores, bars, and restaurants, and those are all these locations here in Nashville. So first, I created that data, and I created about just under, it's probably about a 3/4 mile buffer around each location. So we're looking for pretty local audiences that would be coming to those areas. The next step is I actually enrich that with 2 data sets. So I used, common census data. You can actually find all this data in the CARTO workspace. So when you come to the workspace, you can sign up for a trial or things like that to actually get access to this, but you can actually click on that application here. This is accessible and public for anyone to play around with and use. So this clicking here will open up this application. So feel free to play and test with that as you please. And then you can go into the data explorer here. So this is some of the data observatory data that I used. I used just common census data from 2020. So we have the 2020, 10-year census data here. And I was able to grab the variables I was curious about. So if I look at the data, this is a sample of data, but I got, I think I pulled median age and median income just as a sample set to start to look at. I also pulled in data from Spatial AI, and like I said, what I really like about this is there's geosocial segments to look at the social media activity, and these are categorized into really understandable audiences. So if you look at, let me go here and into data, you can kind of see that there's a few different ones. There's engine enthusiasts, green thumb, wanderlust, dog lovers. So this is kind of, they do the work of taking and blending all that data into these different groups, and this is where people are talking about these types of things. So you have different things about lots of different categories here, and you also have these geosocial segments of population about where people are living. So there's a few that I pulled here. I grabbed I think there's high rise living. There's different family groups for high risers, urbanists, rising professionals, which kind of map to that audience that might be interested in a nitrogen infused cola. Where are they? Where are they going? Where are they shopping? Right. So it was a very I targeted that very clearly. So that was what I did. Those first 2 steps of the analysis were basically creating the trade areas and then enriching that data. Now, when I enrich that data, I also get some really interesting data back from that, which is that correlation table, right? So if we go over here, I can actually see this is within Google Cloud and BigQuery. Here's our positive and negative correlation. So I can see that income is relatively correlated with age. That kind of makes sense. But the rising professionals and high rise groups are pretty well correlated. Urbanists and high risers. So you can see we do have the audiences that we want to match to here. So median income mapping with suburban chic, median income sort of correlating with high rise professionals. So different things here that you want to look for. So this is the data that's going to be feeding into our sort of model to create different clusters. So I created the clusters. I told the model, give me, everything from 4 clusters up to 9 clusters. And once again, we want to look for that lowest number, which in this case, it's telling me that 9 clusters is going to be the best fit, the least error or deviation from what we want, right? Once again, all of this happens here and abstracts it away. So you have the complete interface to do that without going through all this work as well. But off the, to actually look at that in detail, we can see here's our data in Nashville. So what are we looking for? What do we want to see? And what do we want to analyze? So this is our data. I pulled all this together, and what I can do here is basically first style by our number of clusters. So I can see these are the different cluster groups we have, the most common one being cluster 7, which we can start to see, this information here and, analyze that. We also, you can filter and see the clusters later on, but ultimately what we want to do, and this is sort of the use case here that we want to get to, is define these sectors, right? So this is sort of where there comes some interpretation on your part, right? These are where we have some different data here about the clusters. We can see that there's different merchants. There's 2.5K here. This is essentially how we define them to say, okay, what's the profile of consumer that's shopping at these customer or merchant locations? To do that, we can use our data that we pulled in. So you can actually look at all of this data to understand, okay, what is the average age or median age for these different clusters. So as we pull that in, we can start to understand, let's take a look at maybe cluster 7 here. So we'll filter down to cluster 7, which is our most common one. And I'm just going to add some data to look at this on a map. So when I click on it, I can see some new things. So let's add our location name, and then we'll also add looking at median age. And then we'll also add looking at, the count of high risers. So if we look at this here, we can see Big Bad Breakfast Nashville, the median age shopping there is 34, almost 35 years of old. And we can see that there's a total number of, 149 of the high risers group here. Let's also add in median income. And we can see that that's 69,000. So as we start to click through here, we can see that there's that, sort of mid 30s profile, a lot of these restaurants, and they're clustered in these very specific areas. Middle to high income and things like that. Let's go to another cluster and start to see what trends we can pull out. So obviously this cluster is centralized in this downtown area, right? So I think what that's going to tell us is, maybe more of a tourist group, and things like Jimmy John's, the age is going to be vastly off here. So I think this is basically telling us they don't know, from an age perspective. It's, basically when you see something like this, it means that there's less residents in that area, and the income is thrown way off. So probably this is going to be a tourist type of visiting. If you think about, these types of groups, there's less dense population and things like that. So basically that's what we're telling us in this third cluster. If we go to, let's pick up cluster 4 here, and we can start to see, okay, very young, right? You still have some of that high risers profile, but as we keep adding them in, let's go with urbanists, none in that group, high rising professionals. So yeah, you can start to see this as a different group. So very young, clustered around some key areas, a little lower income from our third cluster 3 here. So you can start to categorize these out, right, as you go through cluster 6 here. Sort of we're looking at some fast food profiles and things like that, 7-Eleven. So maybe not our best target. And as we keep adding these in, you can start to see. So when we think about the product we want to target, right, and where those are, I think when we originally looked at this, I think it was cluster 3 was probably our cluster 4, I believe. Sorry, was sort of where we have, which one was I in cluster? Hold on, I think I was in 7? Yeah, 7. So this is probably where we have some of the best overlap, right? We had some of those restaurants that kind of look like, there's a good fit here. Now I'm losing my numbers. Let me see here. I think it wasn't 7, it was 4. No,
7 or 4, I think, Matt.
Well, yeah, I'm trying to remember now. I'm trying to find the breakfast places. So I think, yeah, here we go. So we're looking at, the median income in the range that we want. This kind of maps to a brand proposition from the types of restaurants we want to be in. So effectively what we can say is, okay, if we're creating a rollout plan, we can clearly see there's concentrations of these, right? We can see the spatial clustering around these different areas, and we can kind of understand where we want to target and also who's going to be there, right? So we can very clearly say, okay, this is kind of the group that we want to focus in on. Maybe not our downtown areas, but we also have, some of these other areas that have, the bars and restaurants and things like that. So probably is this 7 and 4 group, and you can start to see the clear correlation to neighborhoods, roads, different areas here that we really want to focus in on. So that has the income level we want to reach, the age range, and the geosocial segments. So if I'm creating a go-to-market, or a route to market plan in Nashville, this is going to, tell me where I want to go. This is giving us our locals in the right income range and the right, sort of geosocial segments. So that's kind of how we can do this from end to end to very quickly create a plan. Now you can create all of that with your plan here. As I go back, it looks like my analysis should have run. I can go in and see my analysis tab here. And this will tell me the same exact thing that I did on my ad hoc analytics over here, and to tell me where I want to go within San Francisco. So I have my different segments here. If I want to look at these different segment lists, I can see the sort of segmentation that I ran. And you can actually see all of that data I showed you under the hood using, sort of standardized models to see where our correlations are. Where's the fits of this different data, who are in those areas. And then I can even start to get more detail here if I want to look at, median income and things like that. So as I click through our pages here, you can see the different clusters and look through that. So if I want to look through more data here, I can find all of those. So this gives me the same type of interactivity through an interface, that's really when we talk about all the value of this is if you're a data analyst or a data scientist and you're familiar with SQL and those types of things, you can do this as many times as you want within your workspace. These functions are available to use and you can enrich with the data that you have. If you're more on the planning side and you're not interacting with code or that on a regular basis, you still get the full full benefit of all that analytics and that power in an application that's very accessible, and you can run this as many times as you want. That's the best part. There's no limits on that. All of it said, it's backed up by research that we've done in the CPG space, and totally standard data science functions and tools that anyone has access to and can use. So that kind of walks you through the use cases here from the customer segmentation app. Please go ahead and check this out. We can also you can check out these blog posts and our documentation to get started to use this. And then that we also kind of studied in Nashville where these areas are that we want to focus in on from writing an ad hoc route to market plan for our Pepsi Nitro product. So that's the demo I had for today. I'm going to go ahead and drop into the last slide here. But yeah, thank you for checking out the demo.
Thanks a lot for that, Matt. Great. So Nashville's a good city for this nitro infused Coke then, or Pepsi.
Yeah, it's one of those cities that had some strong. I mean, it's a young hip city, right? I mean, I think generally people categorize as that. It's more and more I hear it being called like the LA of the South, or something like that. Obviously, you have music, you have nightlife, you have bars, you have restaurants, you have coffee shops. So there's a good study area for that here, right? And then what it told us is where okay, if you think of Nashville, you have that downtown central music district. I forget the street where all the the honky tonks are on, but that's not a good area for this product, right? These are people that are going out listening to music and having a beer. What we want to do is focus on the people and the young professionals that are in Nashville and finding those areas, and specifically which clusters of restaurants and bars and convenience stores and grocery stores can map to that. So these are people that are locally going to these restaurants and bars. They could experience the product when they're having a night out, and then they could back that up and see that product on the shelves in the stores. So that's kind of that loop that you want to create. Now, the great part about this is if I just switch all of this over to Dallas, I can do that. Or if I want to port this over to Denver or any other city, drop this into Chicago, I can do the exact same thing, get the exact same clusters and results out. So it gives me a very repeatable way to plan this market by market by market and give an exact list of places to go, right? And that's the great part. If you want to adjust this model over time, you can do that. Like I said, you can bring your own data about your merchants or your customers. You can bring your own consumer segments. There's no limit on the data you can use. You don't have to use our data. You can use yours. So that's the nice part about this. Like I said, you can do this all programmatically, ad hoc as many times as you want, or you can do it through the interface.
Great stuff. And from a brand manager's perspective as well, it would totally optimize their distribution and trade promotion strategy, right? Because I imagine each brand manager, in this case the brand manager for Nitro, would have an amount of budget within the amount of money in their budget to promote this particular product. And the idea of this analysis, it can optimize where they dedicate those resources, because you can't go with sort of a scattergun approach and have that product placed in every outlet. That wouldn't make sense. So this data analysis really helps the brand manager and the trade promotion team focus in on those points of sales, those bars, those restaurants where the ideal customer profile for this nitro infused Pepsi is going to be spending the evening, and that would help them to optimize their budget.
Yeah, well, we're optimizing in a few ways, right? We can optimize it where you do promotions or, sort of in store type of things or in merchant. If you have a display or you want to commit dollars to, having a dedicated, cooler of this product at a certain location, right? This will tell you, okay, in this Walgreens or in the CVS, if you're selling the product there, maybe think about doing that, or that rather than just having it on the shelf with every other can of soft drink or whatever else that might be. So that it gives you an effect of a spatial amplification, right? You're amplifying the effect and compounding that because you're reinforcing it in all these different areas where someone is, right? Distribution, right? You can tell very clearly if you have a distributor or whatever your distribution system is, where to focus that effort on. So you're amplifying it there, and it can even amplify into digital media, right? You're telling someone where to, here's your consumer base. If you want to create an ad campaign in Nashville, exactly who you want to target, and you can get even as detailed in specific neighborhoods and things like that from a digital perspective. So it's really helping you do a lot of things, but both in the digital domain, in the physical domain, in the distribution domain, in the sales and marketing strategy domain. But all that said, it's basically giving you a very clear plan about how to most effectively use budget, right? And it's giving you a very clear perspective there to focus, hopefully see really good results, and maybe even potentially invest less because you know exactly where and what you want to do.
Great. Okay, I think we can move some questions now, if that's okay with you, Matt.
Yeah, for sure.
So let's just take the first one. So where does the behavioral data come from? Does it have privacy issues? So the behavioral data, we've got lots of behavioral data sources in our data catalog. They come from third-party providers. I think the example that you showed there, Matt, was spatial.ai.
Yep.
And all of this data is aggregated and anonymized, so there's no privacy issues. Remember that we're talking about data visualization based on location. So we're not identifying the individual here, we're identifying characteristics at a particular point on a map. So in fact, none of our data has that private individual component.
Yeah, for even our, mobility data is the only area that would enter in, but we do not, provide the raw data. It's all aggregated, anonymized into, basically looking at trends over space. The specific data we looked at today uses a combination of census data as well as data that's, it uses social media data under the hood, right? Which is publicly available social media posts talking about specific topics. But even then, there's no individualized data there. It doesn't say, Jim was talking about Pepsi at this location at this time. It looks at trends over months and years of data. Now, and that data is updated, I think, quarterly or monthly. So it's regularly telling you where those conversations are shifting to, but it's at the census block group level, which is several, city blocks. In Nashville, it's going to be, a little bit of a larger area, but all aggregated and anonymized, so no privacy issues with the data we saw today.
Cool. Great, thanks for the clarification. Anonymous question here. So we don't have our data in the cloud. Is that a prerequisite?
No. So CARTO allows you to connect to a cloud data warehouse or database if you have it. Those options include Google BigQuery, Amazon Redshift, Snowflake, Databricks, and if you have a PostgreSQL with PostGS database, you can use that too. If you do not have your data in the cloud, we provide the CARTO data warehouse, which has all this functionality in it. So if you sign up for a trial, you get access to that right away, and you can start uploading your data there.
Yep. So it comes with the CARTO data warehouse. Great.
Yep.
Do you leverage external aggregated data sets, e.g. from NIA? So I don't know if you want to take that one, Matt, but yeah, all of the data that we bring in from external third parties is made available through our data catalog, through the data observatory.
Yeah, when you log into CARTO, you can check the data catalog there. Currently, we don't provide data from NIR. We have several other providers, in the US, and that varies from country to country. But we have global coverage for that kind of mobility data, and you can go ahead and take a look, where that is. The other thing to say with all of this is, if you want to move this into Canada, or if you want to move this into whatever location around the globe you want to do, it's just simply taking that data and moving it to a new location. So you're really not constrained by national borders or anything like that. It's very fluid.
Great. Another one here on data. Would we have to pay for all data? Are there any free sources? Well, within the data catalog, there are premium and public data sources. So yep. A combination of both. Some of the premium data sets, yes, you would need to sign a subscription agreement and pay for those data sources, but there are lots and lots and lots of data sets in there already that are public and free.
Yep.
If we wanted to adapt the application, is that possible?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the reason we built this the way we did, is to have the underlying analytics be, sort of its own standalone component, and that can be modified with any number of arguments or options within it, and that interface is just a representation of that. So if you want to modify that, add components in, we made it to be extensible, customizable, and flexible. One of the feedback points that we got when we started down this road is, having that flexibility to map to our business need is going to be really important. So both the analytics can, and the data and the things that you put into it to the models, as well as the actual interface to map to the needs that you have can be changed and edited and modified. So, our team can work with you on what you're looking for from that perspective. So you can reach out and we can kind of talk through what those look like.
Great. Another data question. Can we enhance our customer data with your sources? Yes, you can. So within the analytics toolbox that we described earlier, there are enrichment routines. And obviously you can pull on any source of data from our data observatory to use that data to enrich your own source. So yeah, that's totally feasible and happens within the platform all natively in the cloud.
Yep.
Great. And then one last question. You may have to take this one, Matt. It's quite technical, very technical. So how are you dealing with the fact that k-means does not work well in high dimensional space?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that with k-means, there's a very good call out in terms of how you understand with the high dimensionality. That's why we use the PCA as a layer within that to sort of understand the principal components and, sort of try to isolate and understand them. So actually, if you'll entertain me for a second here, in the function that we have to actually run the analysis, there is an argument for the PCA explain ratio. For, if you want to limit that, we can actually, you can pass all the raw data, or you can have the explained variance within PCA and default that. So this defaults to 0.9. You can change that and adjust that level as you want. So that's sort of what we do here. The input data will pass into PCA and then standardized in order to, sort of remove the, the correlation or multiple collinearity amongst the features. So that's the first step we add into that. And then that goes to k-means. If you don't want that, you don't have to, but like that adds those different layers, in terms of the, adding some of that dimensionality and trying to address that. So.
Great. Okay, I think that's all of the questions. So thank you everyone for posting those questions. And that takes us to the end of the session. So I do hope that you found the content relevant and interesting and entertaining. And of course, we'll share the deck of slides after with the recording. And if you want to try out the CARTO for CPG platform and also the customer segmentation application that Matt showed us there, you can do that by signing up to a free trial on our website. And if you're an existing customer, then it's just a question of reaching out to your contact at CARTO and be happy to walk you through the whole solution in more depth. So yeah, I think that's everything. Thanks a lot, Matt.
Yeah, thank you.
And yeah, thank you for everybody for taking part. Bye-bye.
Bye.